Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We are excited that you are here with us this morning. We at the Chamber are super happy to announce a brand new series of webinars. These webinars are dedicated to address various topics that are important to us, such as marketing, funding options, human resources, among other things. So these webinars are focused to equip small business owners um, and community members for that as well, with information and resources to help navigate businesses during these uncertain times that we're currently living in. So you'll be seeing us reveal more throughout the coming days. We have two others scheduled for the month of July. So if you haven't done so, please register, visit our website, and you'll see them there. We're going to be putting them roughly about weekly or so, so that way um, you experience all that we're offering. And with that, I'll go ahead and discuss some brief webinar housekeeping rules. Um, just for the sake of our speaker and for everyone else who's attending, I ask that you mute your mics, and if you have any distracting backgrounds, I would suggest also you turn your video off. If you have any questions, Lisa will go ahead and answer those um, a little towards the end of the program. So make sure you drop them in the chat, and I'll be on the lookout for those questions in case we don't get to them right there and then. If you have any sensitive questions that you just wish to remain anonymous, you could send me a private message or you could email me directly. And this webinar will be recorded, so you'll be receiving this recording along with a post-event survey email. And as we begin, make sure to include your contact information in the chat box. So we appreciate that. And with that, I'd like to now introduce our speaker for today. She's Lisa Novack, and she works with the IRS. So she's going to be talking everything you need to know before the tax deadline, which is fastly approaching. So Lisa, I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen. And if you want to go ahead and start sharing yours and introduce yourself for us. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for joining us this morning. As she said, my name is Lisa Novack. I'm with Internal Revenue Service. I've been with the IRS since 1987, so I'm going to let you all do the math on that and figure out how long I have been here. I am currently with the Communication and Liaison Division, and so we do outreach and education and try to make sure that people are aware of their tax responsibilities. So one of the things that I wanted to talk to you, or a few of the things I wanted to talk to you about today include there's 3 new tax credits that are available for employers to kind of help through this whole pandemic experience. We're also going to talk a little bit about the filing deadline that's coming up very quickly, as well as what your payment options are if you're going to owe some additional taxes. And then finally, I'm going to wrap up by talking a little bit about the economic impact payments, which people usually know as stimulus payments. So those are the topics that I'm going to cover. Now, just a little bit of a caveat up front. The credits can get a little bit into the weeds, and I'm not going to get into the technical weeds on this information. I just am going to give kind of a high-level overview. Most of you probably already have a tax preparer or an accountant or somebody that you consult with on a regular basis. So this is kind of just an overview so that you're aware that this option is available for you and you can seek out additional information. And I can also advise you on where you can find some additional information on irs.gov. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to shut off my video now since I've been able to greet you all. And just a real quick shout out to the Chamber, and I want to thank you all for the opportunity for inviting me to speak today. Okay, now I need to figure out how to move this slide. There we go. Okay, so let's start out by talking about the Employee Retention Credit. This was established as part of the CARES Act, which was signed into law on March 27th, and it was actually designed to encourage and help businesses to keep their employees on their payroll, during all of these unprecedented times. So the credit's actually available to all employers, regardless of their size, and it's also available for tax-exempt organizations. All right, so what exactly is this credit? Well, it is a fully refundable tax credit. It's available for employers, and it's equal to 50% of wages that the employers pay their employees. So this actually applies to wages that were paid after March 12th of 2020 and before January 1st of 2021. The maximum amount that can be taken into account for each employee for all of the calendar quarters for the year is actually $10,000. So that means if the maximum credit is 50% of the wages, the maximum credit that you can get is $5,000 per employee. And so the credit is going to apply against employment taxes. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a bit.
Lisa, sorry to cut you off, but is everyone having issues viewing the slides? I'm just seeing your email slide for some reason.
My email slide?
Yes, or your email for some reason.
Is it the thank you slide?
It's the one with the little boy and the flag. That's only for
Oh,
just the intro, yeah.
really?
Just the intro preview.
Because I've been moving it along. I don't know what I would be doing wrong. Let's see. Maybe I should. No, I shared it.
You can email it to Elizabeth too if you want to as a backup.
She has it.
You have
Yeah. Hang on a second. Let me see if this will work.
Are you on the families for, oh, I see the little family slide.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
we can see your slides now.
All right, but I need to go back. I need to, let's try this. Okay. Try this again. Oh, all right. Sorry about this. Always technical issues.
No worries.
All right, now I lost that presentation. I think this is it. Oh, of course. That is not where I wanted to go with that. Let's try this. All right, can you still see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, and we're back to the little boy?
Yes.
All right, and you can see the next slide now?
Yes.
All right, so I am actually up to who would be an eligible employer now.
Okay, perfect.
So the credit is actually as I said, available to all employers regardless of their size, also including tax-exempt organization. However, there are two exceptions, and those would be governmental employers and also self-employed individuals for their own services and earnings. So it still applies for their employees, but it wouldn't apply for their own services and earnings. So in order to be eligible, employers have to fall into one of two categories. So they would either have their business fully or partially suspended by government order due to COVID-19 during that calendar quarter, or they would have experienced a significant decline in gross receipts during the calendar quarter. All right, so what's a significant decline? Well, you'd have to look back to the prior year to what you did in 2019. And if your gross receipts are below 50% of a comparable quarter in 2019, that would be a significant decline. Now, at any point in a quarter when your gross receipts go above 80% of that comparable quarter in 2019, then you're no longer going to qualify after the end of that quarter when you reach that 80%. All right, so what would be considered qualified wages? Again, you're going to have to look back to 2019 to see how many employees you had during the year. And so you're going to look at your full-time employees. So an employer with 100 employees or fewer, the credit is going to be based on all the wages paid to all employees, and that's regardless of whether they provided services or not. So if the employees worked full-time and they were paid for full-time work, you're still going to receive the credit based on those wages, as well as the wages you paid for somebody who wasn't providing services at that time. If there's an employer with more than 100 employees, then that credit is going to be allowed only for the wages paid to employees for the time that they're not providing services. All right, so how do you go about claiming the credit? Well, so you're going to report your total qualified wages and the related credits for each calendar quarter on the federal employment tax return, and so that's usually the Form 941. Now, in anticipation of claiming these credits, because of course the 941 is filed quarterly, you can fund the qualified wages by accessing the federal employment taxes, including any withheld taxes that are required to be deposited with the IRS. If you don't have enough federal tax deposits to cover that, you can actually request an advance of the credit by filing a Form 7200, which is advanced payment of employer credits due to COVID-19. And this way you can claim an advance refund for the full amount of that anticipated credit. So that's a great benefit. It's a way to get that money into your hands right away, or as quickly as possible, I guess I should say. Okay, so for additional information, we have tons of coronavirus tax-related information on IRS.gov. We have specifically accumulated some frequently asked questions about the employee retention credit on IRS.gov. So you can go, and I'll show you some information about our homepage in a little bit, but you can access our frequently asked questions there. We did put out a news release, 2020-62, in March about the employee retention credit. The Form 7200 will also kind of help walk you through some of that stuff, as well as the Form 941. So I would suggest, if you want some more information on that, you can take a look at our website. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to talk about, and these are, so we talked about the employee retention credit, which is one credit, and I'm going to cover two credits as part of the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. This actually provides small and mid-sized employers some refundable tax credits that reimburse them dollar for dollar for the cost of providing paid sick and paid family leave wages to their employees. And this, of course, would be leave related to COVID-19. So what it does is it gives businesses with fewer than 500 employees the funds to provide the employees with that paid leave, either for the employees' own health needs or to care for family members. So that's where we're going to kind of differentiate it a little bit. So there are a couple of aspects to this act here. So workers may receive up to 80 hours of paid sick leave for their own health needs or to care for others. And then the other part of it is they can get an additional 10 weeks or up to an additional 10 weeks of paid family leave to care for a child whose school or place of care is closed or unavailable due to COVID-19. So this act actually covers the cost of providing this paid leave by providing you with the refundable tax credits. Now, the rate of pay for the paid sick leave for that employee who's actually sick is at 100% of their pay. And of course, this is if they are unable to work due to their own personal health conditions. So if they're subject to a federal, state, or local quarantine, maybe they've been advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine, or they might even be experiencing some symptoms and they're seeking a medical diagnosis. So in these instances, the total pay is capped at $511 per day, or $5,110 in total for that 2-week period of time. Now, if you've got an employee who's unable to work due to his or her own need to care for someone else, that rate of pay for paid sick leave is going to be at 2/3 of the employee's pay. And again, so this is if they're caring for an individual subject to, federal, state, or local quarantine order, or they're caring for their own child whose school or place of care is closed, or they're experiencing any other similar condition that's specified by the Department of Health and Human Services. Now, in this instance, the total pay is capped at $200 per day, or $2,000 in total. So the last part of this would be the paid family leave credit. And so this is where an employee can use their paid family leave to care for his or her son or daughter whose school or place of care is closed due to COVID-19. But in this instance, they can get up to 10 weeks of paid leave when if available. They're paid at 2/3 of the employee's regular pay, very similar to the other part of it. But the employer can pay up to $200 a day, or $10,000 for the total period of time. So for that whole 10-week period. And of course, the qualified health plan expenses are also includable in this calculation. All right, so how do you claim this credit? Well, it's all very similar to what we talked about under the employee retention credit. So in this situation, you'll be able to retain an amount of the employment taxes, again, that are equal to the amount of the qualified leave wages that were paid, rather than depositing that amount with the IRS. If there's not sufficient employment taxes to cover the cost of qualified leave, you can request the advance payment on that Form 7200 that we've already talked about. So they're very similar in treatment. Okay, so again, resources that are available. Now, this program is overseen by the Department of Labor. So they have a lot of questions and answers that are on their website that relate to the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. So you can check there. We've also got some frequently asked questions about these credits on irs.gov. We do have a news release about that as well, and you can refer to the 7200 or the 941 for additional information as well. Okay, so today's date is July 8th. And so what that means is that if you haven't yet filed your tax return for 2019, you have 1 week left. Since most returns and payments that were due between April 1st and July 15th were postponed until July 15th. So this came out initially on March 20th, where they said, you know, the federal income tax filing due date is postponed. And then they said you could defer payments as well until July 15th. And then shortly after that, they came out with Notice 2023. And this actually expanded relief to additional returns beyond the 1040. It also applied to tax payments and some other actions. So as a result of this, the postponements really kind of applied to all taxpayers that have a filing or payment deadline falling on or after April 1st and before July 15th. So what this means is it applied to individuals, trusts, estates, corporations, and other non-corporate tax filers. So everybody got pretty much that extra time if that return or payment was due on or after April 1st. But so what does that mean? Well, you want to go ahead and make sure that you get your return filed timely. Now, these notices and this guidance actually prompted a lot of questions. So we did have a lot of Q&As added to irs.gov. One of the questions, though, that I did want to call to your attention is how and when do I pay my first and second quarter 2020 estimated income taxes? And so this is really important to pay attention to right now, because if you postponed your estimated tax payments that were due April 15th for the first quarter and June 15th for the second quarter, you're going to want to make a single payment that's going to be sufficient enough to cover that first and second quarter. But you want to make sure that you make those payments on or before July 15th. Okay, so that is coming up. So if you haven't thought about that, if you haven't done it, this might be a real good time to put some effort into that. Okay, so, you know, for this initial postponement, you didn't have to do anything. You didn't have to file an extension. Everybody was automatically extended to July 15th. Now, you might fall into a situation where maybe you haven't thought about this in a while and you think, oh my goodness, July 15th is next week. I'm not going to be able to get this done. Well, you still have an option to file an extension. So you can file the form 4868 to get an extension. But the easiest way is actually to electronically file that form, and you can actually use any tax software that you might use. You can go through your tax professional, or there's actually a free file link on irs.gov, and you can access the extension through that as well. So if you're in a pinch, you know, you could do that. Now, businesses, so you know, partnerships or corporate returns, you would need to file a form 7004 to extend it to October 15th. Now, just to stress that you have to request the automatic extension by July 15th. So make sure that you get on that if you're going to need to file an extension. Another thing to remember is an extension to file is not an extension to pay any taxes owed. You know, our tax system is a pay-as-you-go, so the expectation was that you would have paid already through estimated taxes or through withholding or something along those lines. So if you properly estimate your 2019 tax liability using the whatever information is available to you, and if you file that extension by July 15th, your tax return is going to be due October 15th. But to avoid any interest and penalties when you actually do file your return in October, you want to make sure that you estimate and pay any tax due with that extension. Okay, so you don't want to put that off because you might face some additional penalties and interest. All right, so what happens if you get your return done in the next week and find out that you owe additional taxes? And this might happen for several different reasons. Maybe you didn't make estimated tax payments. Maybe you didn't know to make estimated tax payments throughout the year. Or maybe you and your spouse work as employees and you don't have enough taxes withheld from your wages. You know, there's a number of different scenarios that could cause this. So there's actually several different options to make a payment, or even if you're unable to pay. So we'll go ahead and take a look at what some of those options are for you. So if you do have a balance due, you know, paying electronically really is the most convenient way to pay, especially in this time, you know, during these unprecedented times. We are struggling right now to kind of catch up on all the correspondence and the payments and the paper tax returns that were filed. So anytime you can interact with us electronically, it's going to be easier on you, and it'll probably result in a much quicker processing or response or anything along those lines. So there are actually lots of options for initiating payments, whether it be online, by phone, or even from a mobile device. And just so that you know, we do use the latest encryption technology, so paying electronically is very safe and secure. So for those of you that are a little leery of it, we do have very good technology on this end. You know, if you think about it, when you use any kind of these electronic payment options, it really puts you in control of paying your tax bill, and it'll give you the peace of mind to know that the payment was made and the payment was received. So using these options, you can actually schedule them in advance. You'll receive confirmation after it's submitted, so you have verification that it was paid. So it is really quick and it's easy and it's secure, and it's much faster than actually mailing in a check or money order. Oftentimes you can actually make the payment before you get your checkbook out, write the check, get an envelope, put a stamp on it, take it to the post office. You know, your payment could be made already by now. So this is our payment options page, and so this is where you would be able to access pretty much any information on the different options that we have. We've also got the IRS To Go app that you can put on your phone, and you can actually make payments through that as well. So let's look at some of the different options. So the first one is the electronic funds withdrawal. And this is actually integrated into the electronic filing option. So this is offered only when you're filing your federal taxes using tax preparation software. So if you do your own return, and if you're in the software, you will have the option of having the electronic funds withdrawal. Or if you pay a tax professional, they can actually facilitate this for you at the same time that they electronically file your return. Now, when you use this option, you can submit one or more payment requests for direct debit from your designated bank account. Now, not only can you use this to pay the balance due on most of your business and personal tax returns when you file electronically, but when filing a current year 1040, you can also schedule electronic funds withdrawal for any of your estimated tax payments. So you can actually use this system to set up your future estimated tax payments. Now, one of the things, and this is what I've told some of my friends too, the nice thing about this is, you can get your return done early in the year if you're, if you're on top of things and you want to make sure you get things done. So for instance, in a normal year, you could file your return in March, and if you're going to owe additional money, you can always schedule that payment out. If you don't want to pay it any sooner than April 15th, when you're setting this payment up, you can set it to come out on April 15th, and you'll have everything done at that point. Just make sure that you have the funds in there on the date it's going to be withdrawn. Okay, the next option that you have is something called direct pay. And so if you are an individual, so this doesn't apply to business returns, but for an individual taxpayer, this is going to give you, again, a free, secure electronic payment method. So you can actually go online and you can schedule your payment directly from your checking or savings account. So as I mentioned, it's available for individual taxpayers only. You have to have a valid Social Security number or individual tax identification number to use the system. So of course it doesn't accommodate EINs. But a nice thing about using this system is it actually gives you that immediate confirmation after you submit the payment. So to use the system, there isn't even any pre-registration required. You can set up your payments in a single session, and there's like 5 very simple steps to getting into this. I mean, it takes minutes, less than 5 minutes, I would say. All right, so if you maybe prefer to pay by credit or debit card, we do have an option for that as well. You can see on the screen, you can just click on pay by card on that payment options page. So again, you can use this to pay online, you can pay by phone, or even through the IRS To Go app. This option is available whether you e-file, whether you paper file, or even whether you're responding to a bill or notice. Now we do use standard service providers and business and commercial card networks, so it is safe and secure. And just be assured that the taxpayer information is used solely to process the payment, so it's not sold or provided to anybody else. Now we do have a payment processors page here that you can navigate to from that link that I showed you on the previous page. So there's 3 payment processors to choose from, and you can see that here in this table. This service provider does charge a fee, and the fees do vary depending on the provider that you select. So the fee does go directly to the provider. It is not a fee that's imposed by the IRS. And then also keep in mind, if you choose to pay by card when you're e-filing through that integrated system, the fees are going to differ a little bit from those in the table above. So there is another link that you can access that'll take you to the specific fees for that option as well. Now, a few things to keep in mind when you're paying with a debit or credit card. Your statement is going to list the payment as United States Treasury tax payment, but the convenience fee is going to be listed separately. That's paid to the provider. So it's going to be listed as something like tax payment convenience fee or something similar to that. Also, you usually can't really cancel the payments once you schedule them, so keep that in mind as well. And then one other thing is that not all IRS tax forms are eligible to be paid by credit card. and there are some limits on how often you can make payments depending on the form. So again, we do have a frequency limit table that you can access and take a look at that as well. Another option we have is the Electronic Federal Tax Payment System, or EFTPS. This is, again, a free service for paying federal taxes, and this applies to both individuals and businesses, and it's actually the only way to make federal tax deposits. But you can also pay just about any federal tax using EFTPS. So there's a two-step process to getting set up on this. So it's something that you're going to want to think about prior to the due date of these payments. So, I would give myself, maybe 5 to 7 days to set this up initially. Once you're set up, you don't have to worry about it. But if you're not yet set up, you're going to have to go through a process in order to get enrolled. And then, so just keep in mind, to make your payment, you would go to eftps.gov. Now, for business taxpayers, your payment instructions have to be submitted to EFTPS by 8 p.m. Eastern Time, at least one day in advance of that due date. So you can schedule your payments up to 365 days in advance, and those funds won't move from your account until the date that you indicate. Now, for individual taxpayers, you can actually submit your payment instructions on the same day up to 11:45 p.m. Eastern Time, and you can still receive credit for that same day payment. Also, individuals can schedule up to 365 days in advance as well. But as with some of the other options, the businesses and individuals will receive an immediate acknowledgement of the payment instructions. Another nice thing about EFTPS is you can actually look up 16 months of your electronic federal tax payment history. So sometimes that comes in handy for you too. So to find more information, you can go to eftps.gov. If you look on the screen over to the left, there's a link for frequently asked questions, FAQ there. Also, there is a help and information link, and that's circled up there on the screen. Right here, you can access like downloadable materials. There's also a payment instruction booklet there as well. So, the frequently asked questions cover things like, how do I change my banking information, or how do I monitor my payment history, especially if I outsource my payroll. So those are some good questions that people ask a lot. All right, let's talk about cash payments. So we do have an option for you to pay in cash without actually having to visit a taxpayer assistance center. Of course, we do encourage you to just make your payments online electronically using other methods, but if you prefer to pay in cash, we do offer IRS Pay Near Me option at participating 7-Eleven locations. Now, you can access more information by going to irs.gov/paywithcash, but just know that it generally takes about 5 to 7 business days to process a payment using this method. So again, with this, you really want to make sure that you plan ahead of any due date to make sure that your payment gets posted timely. So what's going to happen is once you go in there and register on the irs.gov/paywithcash, you're going to receive an email from Official Payments confirming that information. Then the IRS has to verify the information. So this is going to take, maybe 2 to 3 days right up front. Then you're going to get a barcode. You can either print that out or you could bring it into the store with your smartphone. You take that to the store, they're going to scan your code, and you will receive the receipt once you make your payment. Now, there's a few things to consider with this option. There is a fee of $3.99 per payment. Payments are limited to $1,000 per day. And again, just like that pay by card option, not all IRS tax forms are eligible, and there's limits as to how often you could make payments. So this is probably the most common way people make payments. So you can still pay by check or money order, but we do really still encourage you to look into those electronic options. But if you do choose to mail a payment, you want to make sure that it is made out to U.S. Department of Treasury. You want to enter the amount using all numbers, and you want to send the payment with a voucher, with a return, or with a notice. But we ask that you don't staple it to any of those documents. You want to make sure that the check or the money order actually contains the information that's shown here on the slide. And also you want to make sure that you mail your payment to the address that's listed on the notice or instructions. Now, we do accept payments at our TAC offices, our taxpayer assistance centers, but just be aware, first of all, they're closed right now, but they are all by appointment only, so oftentimes it might take a few weeks to be able to get an appointment to get in there. All right, so what happens if you can't pay now? So you can actually apply for a payment plan online to pay off your balance over time. And your specific tax situation is going to determine which payment options are available for you. But individual taxpayers, if you want to be able to pay within 120 days or less, you can request a short-term payment plan. Or individuals or business taxpayers can request a long-term payment plan, which would be considered an installment agreement, where you'd be paying in more than 120 days. So if it's going to take you more than 4 months to pay it off, you'll want to apply for an installment agreement. So for more information on this, you can go to irs.gov, click on the Pay tab, and then go to the Can't Pay Now section. You can see that in the lower right-hand corner there. And we also have some videos on this type of thing, and so it's at irsvideos.gov. So if you're kind of a visual learner, that might be a place for you to go as well. There's a lot of great resources there beyond those payment videos as well. Okay, so I just kind of wanted to point out here that each of the options that we've discussed today are accessible from this payments page. So I'll show you the home page in a minute that's going to have that Pay tab on it. And so if you just click on that, it's going to take you to this page. Or you can just go to irs.gov/payments. So just to reiterate some of the points that I made today, of course, electronic payments can be made online or via IRS To Go mobile app. Direct pay is only for individual taxes. Your federal tax deposits have to be made using EFTPS system, but other taxes can be paid using that system as well. Just a reminder, check or money orders are accepted, but you want to make sure that you make them out to the U.S. Treasury and make sure they're sent to the appropriate address as well. If you're going to use that pay by cash system, you want to make sure to give yourself at least 5 to 7 business days. I might even give it more, maybe 10 days, just to make sure that you can get through the whole system and get it posted timely. And then, of course, if you can't pay immediately, you can request an installment agreement through the Pay tab. Okay, so this is your the irs.gov homepage, the top part of it. If you look in under the IRS logo in the blue tab there, It says File, Pay, Refunds, Credits, and Deductions. So if you click on the Pay tab there, it's going to take you to that Payments option that I just showed you. The other thing I wanted to call your attention to on this page is there's a link to non-filers, enter payment info here. There's a link to get my payment, which applies to the economic impact payment, which we'll talk about in just a minute. And also there's a link to get coronavirus tax relief, and that's where you would click to be able to get to the information that I talked to you about earlier about the credits. And so you'll see if we navigate over, when we click on that link, it's going to take you to this, a page that looks like this. And kind of down in the middle of the page, you'll see where it says business and tax exempt entities. And there is going to be a link there for the new employer tax credits. So that's where you can go to get additional information on those topics. All right, so as I wrap up, I really wanted to share some information about the economic impact payments, otherwise known as stimulus payments. So, you know, this really came about also as the CARES Act. Hopefully most of you, if you were eligible, you've already received your payment, or maybe you're in the process of receiving it. I know the latest stat I have is through June 5th, we had issued nearly 160 million economic impact payments. I know that's much higher now, but I don't have a specific number, so I didn't want to speculate on that. Most people already know what the numbers are for the maximum amount of the credits. So if you're filing jointly, you would be eligible for up to $2,400. Those individuals filing as single or head of household could be eligible up to $1,200. And you could get $500 for each qualifying child claimed by an eligible individual. Now, those are maximum amounts. So just to be clear, there's an upper income limit to qualify for stimulus checks, but there isn't a lower limit. So, you know, there's a popular misconception out there that people who don't work or don't have any other sources of income aren't eligible for this, but that's actually simply not the case. So there are some Americans that may not receive a stimulus check unless they take a specific action. You know, we've been issuing these payments based on the 2018 or the 2019 returns that were filed, or even some of the government benefits that were issued. So if somebody, you know, received Social Security or SSI, we were able to identify them and get them a payment quickly. Some of these folks, though, might not be in our system, so we don't know to send them a payment. So specifically, you know, there might be somebody who hasn't worked in a long time or not at all. So they might not be receiving any income or Social Security benefits or anything along those lines. So for example, I have a friend who has some health issues and she's not able to work. So she doesn't have any income. She lives with her fiance. He doesn't claim her as a dependent. So she was able to register and get a payment even though she had no taxable income. So, you know, there might be situations where there's a college student who might have just graduated from college. They haven't worked. They're 22 years old. Nobody claims them as a dependent. They might be eligible for a payment, but we don't know about them. So they're going to have to take that extra step. You know, there's some people who don't make enough money to even have to file a return. So if an individual makes under 12,200, or if a married couple makes under 24,400, they're not required to file a tax return. So they might not even mess with it. You know, they might not have a big refund coming. It might cost them more money to go have somebody prepare the returns. So if they haven't filed in a couple years, they're going to need to kind of self-identify themselves here. So these tools that I want to talk to you about today is a way that these folks can do this. Now, why am I telling you this? I'm hoping that you will be able to share this information with people that you might know that are in this type of situation. you know, if you know of somebody who's not working and not getting any income, you might mention this to them. And so how do they go about doing it? Well, if you look at this on the right side of the screen, there's what's called the non-filer, enter your payment info here. And that's a tool that those folks can use to submit themselves for a payment. And this is basically them just giving us basic information, social security number, address, bank account if they have it, you know, just so that we have enough information to get them a payment. Now, for folks that maybe were required to file in 2018 and 2019 but didn't, they want to make sure that they file as they normally would, not to use this tool because it might screw things up a little bit. Over on the left, the other tool is the Get My Payment tool. And so this actually allows you to check the status of your payment and to update your bank information if we don't already have an account that's related to direct deposit for you. So in a previous years, you might have had to pay. So you wrote a check, or maybe you didn't opt for direct deposit, you got a check instead. But so this is where you could go in and update that direct deposit information there. So again, if you know somebody who's eligible for a payment, but who doesn't file a return, they can go online using that non-filers tool. And then once they submit that information, after a couple weeks, once everything updates, they should be able to go to the Get My Payment tool to check on the status. And this is going to tell whether, you know, it'll tell you the amount of the payment that's going to be going out, and it will tell you whether it's going to be direct deposited or paid by mail. One other thing I wanted to share with you that you might not know is in some cases, they're issuing the payment on a debit card rather than a check. So there's been some folks who weren't expecting this, and so they might have thought it was a scam or it was some kind of advertisement, or you know, they might have just shredded it without even opening it. So there is some additional information on irs.gov/EIP. And then if there's specific information about those cards, like how to replace the card that you might have destroyed, you can go to eipcard.com to get information about that. All right, and there are lots of coronavirus related tax scams out there, or just scams in general, I guess I should say. So I just wanted to bring this to your attention and warn you that there are people out there impersonating the IRS, using phone calls, texts, and even email. They want to get your personal information. They want to get money from you. They want to do all sorts of things. But I just wanted to share this information to bring it to your attention and just let you know that the IRS is not going to call you or email you or text you to ask you for any of your personally identifiable information, any financial information, any banking information. Normally we do business by snail mail. We might occasionally call, but more often than not, you're going to have received a letter, so you'll be expecting it. One good indicator that it's a scam is that we do not do business by email or by text. So we are not going to email you and text you and tell you that you have a refund coming or that you owe additional taxes or anything like that. So that's a really good indicator right there. As with everything else, you need to be careful with the websites you're visiting and any social media attempts to request money. You don't want to click on any links or attachments in any unwanted or unsolicited emails, especially if they look like they're coming from the IRS. Do not ever provide any personal or financial information over the phone or online. You really need to be careful what you're disclosing there. If you do come across what looks like a suspicious email, you can send it to phishing@irs.gov. The instructions here say to delete it. I would say kind of hang on to it. Sometimes we might contact you to get more information and maybe they would want to see the original message. to get some information off of that. So, and then just a couple of insider information about the types of scams that we see. So occasionally somebody might call you and say they're from the IRS and say that we erred in sending you this payment. So if you haven't cashed that check yet, you can sign it over to them. If, oh, you've deposited that check already, well, guess what? I'll stay on the phone with you while you go to Walmart and buy some gift cards. That is a sure sign that it is a scam. Again, we're not going to call you. If we need to reach you in any way, we're going to send you a letter about it. There are folks that are contacting people saying, hey, if you pay me XYZ dollars, I can get your tax refund for you faster, or I can get you that economic stimulus payment. Those are generally scams as well. So just be on the lookout for that kind of stuff. So as I mentioned, I showed you the coronavirus tax relief page on irs.gov. I do encourage you to share any or all of this information that we've talked about today with other people. So with your, family, your friends, your colleagues, your staff, anybody, not just the economic impact payment stuff, but also the scam stuff, also the credit information if you've got friends who might be in business and might qualify for that. Just a little plug here for our social media accounts. We are on Twitter, we're on Facebook, Instagram, we're on LinkedIn, so you can get a lot of information. We do try to post, some informative information, especially during this the COVID-19 pandemic. So we also have some of our accounts are in Spanish, so we've got @IRS in Espanol on Twitter if you'd like to follow us there as well. And then finally, I just wanted to call this to your attention. This is publication 4128, and it talks about the tax impact of a job loss. Oftentimes the loss of a job might create new tax issues. So this publication is going to help address that. And these might be things that people haven't thought about during these times. So for instance, severance pay and unemployment compensation, those are taxable. If you had to withdraw money from your pension plan to survive during this time, that's generally taxable unless they're transferred to a qualified plan. So there's a lot of different things to consider if you have lost your job. And with that, I think I've run almost over. So I want to thank everybody for their time and attention. If you have any questions, though, I'll be happy to stick around and answer any of those. So if you want to stick around, feel free. I just wanted to let you know my email address is on this slide, so you can write that down. If you have any questions that you weren't able to ask today, feel free to reach out to me. Thank you again, and thank you to the Chamber.
Thank you, Lisa. This was really informative, by the way.
Thank you.
I did catch one question that came through the chat, and they're asking, what if they go through a PEO for payroll? We don't have, it was back to the beginning of the presentation almost. She says, we don't have a 941. Can you briefly go over that?
So if you go through, I'm not really sure. If the person is still on, if you wanted to reach out to me through email, and I will try to get you some additional information on that.
Okay, great.
Anything else?
Let's see. Anyone else have any questions? Feel free to put them in the chat.
I know that was a lot of information, and I talked very quickly.
Great, we're just getting a lot of positive feedback. Thank you, Lisa, great information.
Awesome.
Super helpful. So we'll be sharing more information and the recording to you all shortly after the event. and we'll also send a couple links that Lisa provided during the presentation for you all. So with that, if there's no other questions, we will go ahead and wrap up this webinar. Again, thank you so much, Lisa, for today's presentation. Really informative and very timely, of course. And wish you all a great day, and hope to see you in the next Business Success webinar series presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much.